Joining me now is the Labor MP, Peter Khalil. He's the chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. Peter Khalil, thanks for your time. We saw those rallies, some of the anti-Semitic slurs that were chanted. That social cohesion that you have written about in the last day or so that is so important to our nation, those sorts of behaviours risk that, don't they?
Yes, Kieran, and let me just start. The context of this, of course, is that the government and the Prime Minister, we have all utterly condemned, categorically condemned those statements. We are in a liberal democracy. We have a right to peaceful protest, but the behaviours that we've seen, whether it's a hate speech, incitement of hatred or violence of ethnic or religious type, or even celebration of the death of innocent civilians, is utterly unacceptable and is to be utterly condemned, and has been. And that's really important. I'm very concerned, as you said, about the impacts on our social cohesion. As chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, I know the work that our security agencies do to safeguard our social cohesion, our multicultural and pluralistic society. And I would say too, on that point, there is a lot of work being done to ensure that places of worship, synagogues, schools, community centres, businesses are protected in this current circumstance. And that's really important. I spoke also to the Deputy Premier in Victoria this morning. I know the Victorian government is very cognizant of that work and have increased the work of Victoria Police around those community centres. It really is incumbent upon us as a government to ensure that yes, we have a right to peaceful protest, but those types of behaviours is not peaceful protest. There's a responsibility. I think you had Claire O'Neill, the Home Affairs Minister, on your program earlier, and she asked a very pertinent question. What kind of message is that sending to fellow Australians?
And in terms of the direct message that we've heard as well, a couple of incidents, but I think the police are looking into both of them, the Victorian and New South Wales police, of particular harassment of individual members of the Jewish community. That's also part of the story here. You talk about protecting the schools, protecting synagogues, places of worship, but that also has to be part of the story to protect individuals, doesn't it?
That's right. So in these circumstances, obviously, and I've spoken to the Home Affairs Minister, I know too that she has triggered or established the National Coordination Mechanism, which allows obviously federal, state, local forces and authorities to work in a constructive manner together around these issues. And there is a real work around making sure that both individuals who might be threatened, but also those community centres, places of worship and schools and businesses have the adequate protections around them. The communities, the Jewish Australian community is obviously going through a very difficult time, and it is incumbent upon the government to ensure that all Australians, including them, of course, are protected from these types of threats. And I would say too, when I talked earlier about protest and behaviour, we have utterly condemned that type of behaviour. That is incumbent upon Australians to think through. We have that right that we have in a liberal democracy to free expression. And I understand that people have strong views, understandable strong views around the long-standing and history of this conflict in the Middle East region. And they have a right to express those views peacefully, but also I think it's important, it's incumbent upon them to do so respectfully. And really understand too, I think, Kieran, that, and this is not within the bounds of law so much, but that we cannot be indifferent to human suffering wherever it occurs. There is a real need to ensure that we are cognizant of that human suffering as well.
We've got these live pictures from Gaza. It's just past 7:30 a.m. Sun is up. Another day without electricity or water or food. With that, or food being delivered anyway. They're obviously living off the supplies that they had, the civilians there. But the attacks by Hamas, you have written that they do not advance the cause of Palestinian self-determination or statehood, with a ground incursion looking likely now, and retaliation. And I think it's fair that Israel, as you've said, and I think others have said as well in the government, has every right to defend itself. So we can expect that retaliation and ground incursion in the next few days. What, if any, strategy was behind Hamas's atrocities over the weekend?
So the first point is that Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organisation for a reason. Its charter calls for the destruction of Israel. It's operationally one where it attacks innocent civilians. We've seen the attack and the killing of innocent civilians, women and children and toddlers and babies. And that is not dissimilar from Islamic State's tactical operational the way they operated, particularly in northern Syria and northern Iraq. As far as a strategic objective, if you look at the broader objectives here, and there is a lot of reporting around Iran's connection with Hamas as a proxy of Iran as well as Hezbollah, clearly, strategically, the Saudi-Israeli peace negotiation has been scuttled by these actions, by these terrorist attacks. So there is some benefit or advantage to Iran's regional hegemony in this context. As far as an endgame, again, what they have done, Hamas, certainly does not advance the cause of Palestinian self-determination, nor does it advance the cause of Palestinian statehood. And clearly now with the Israeli Defence Force and Israeli government making decisions, well, they have to make some very difficult decisions about the hostages that have been taken across the border to Gaza and what kind of ground offensive occurs. They've been very clear that they are now seeking as an objective to destroy Hamas and its leadership. This is going to be a very difficult couple of weeks for all of the civilians involved who will be impacted by this conflict. And I would say the number one priority always in a conflict should be the avoidance of harm against innocent civilians and to work within the bounds and obligations under international law.
And you've picked up on those geopolitical risks there, with Iran as well being the sponsor of Hamas. We've only got 30 seconds left, but are there any other geopolitical implications that we need to keep an eye on?
Look, I think, Kieran, certainly regionally, from Australia's perspective, regional stability is something that we keep an eye on, making sure that there is a real understanding across the international community of the support necessary to within the context of the crisis. And I don't want to see any of that spilling over, as we talked about earlier, into our domestic or our social cohesion. So these are real challenges for all of us over the coming weeks.
Indeed. Chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, Peter Khalil, thanks. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.